SalesCrunch. Learn more, earn more.
Hey everybody, welcome to Sales School. I have a couple people in the waiting room. We'll just keep bringing everybody in as they show up. We're going to be talking about virtual sales presentations. Everyone's going to be on mute for obvious reasons. If you want to ask questions during the session, I will address at the end. All you need to do is put your questions into the chat room, which is all accessible on the left-hand side of your screen. Melissa will be capturing those questions, and then we'll bring them up at the end when we can address them all. Okay. So I think we'll get started. There's more people showing up, but we'll let them in as they come. So we're here to learn a little bit about virtual sales presentations and my top 5 tips. So I'll start by telling you who I am, so you can gauge whether or not you should listen to me. We got some feedback in past sessions that people wanted to know what the presenters look like. So I'm showing you a quick picture of me. I'm the founder and CEO of SalesCrunch, which I would love to believe is enough for you to want to believe everything I'm about to say. But because I don't believe that's true, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. Before starting SalesCrunch in April of last year, I was the founding VP sales at Trulia.com. If you guys don't know, Trulia is now the second or third largest consumer real estate site in the country. Back in 2005, when we started Trulia, we were about 5 people at the end of that year. And we slowly built the company up over the past 6 years to where Trulia is now 250 employees. I'm proud to say half of which are in sales, and it's by far the fastest growing part of the company, and what's driving the whole company to growth. And there were 3 different sales teams there, 2 outside enterprise sales teams, and 1 large inside sales team, all selling display advertising to various types of customers in various size deals. You know, I learned a lot in the last 6 years. I've been in sales my whole life, but I definitely learned a lot in a very quick period of time. And one of the things that I learned is, you just have to know this point. One of the things that I learned is no matter what role you play in your company, at the end of the day, we all have a job for exactly one reason, and that's to make money. I think as much as all of us want to make a difference and make meaning, at the end of the day, you don't report meaning to your investors or to Wall Street, you report sales. So I think it's actually no surprise that the best companies in the world are the ones where everybody touches the customer and the sale at some point in the process. You know, the other thing I learned is that in the vast majority of companies out there, sales is more of a fuzzy process than it is, or fuzzy art more than it is a repeatable process or pattern. And in fact, statistically, Accenture just did a report a couple weeks ago that says 80% of revenue at most companies comes from 20% of the sales force, while the other 80% are sort of left on their own to sink or swim. And that makes sense because there is no formal education in sales, and there is no college degree or MBA in sales, unfortunately. It is very much a soft art, but I think has a lot of opportunity to apply science to. So hopefully we'll apply a little bit of science today with the top 5 virtual presentation tips that I think that I've learned over the course of just the last couple of years alone. If you don't get the reference here, the cultural reference of High Fidelity, it's a great movie. Watch it or watch it again. The whole movie was about John Cusack's top 5 list in music, whether it was genre or band or songs. And at the end of the movie, he goes from being kind of a loser music store employee to creating his own record company called Top 5 Records. It was a good photo on there. So if you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, go watch it because it's a classic. Looking down is it? The number one tip, I didn't do this like David Letterman in reverse. I did it from where I think it makes chronological sense. So I think the first thing that you need to do when in an increasingly virtual world is to make a personal connection. And I think the better technology gets and the better people, or the more people adopt it, the more we end up doing a lot of our job virtually these days. And it's pretty hard, you know. I mean, sales used to be about it used to be about relationships. It used to be about FaceTime. It used to be about reading buying signals. And I think to a large extent it is still about that. I mean, people do business with people they know and trust. You have to get to the point in an online, in a virtual setting where you can create that trust, foster it fast. The good news is that in the last 5 years alone, sales has changed quite a bit. People don't rely on salespeople the way they did 10 years ago, mostly because there's a plethora of information about our products and opinion, for that matter, rampantly online and in social networks. And I think to a large extent, cold calling has been replaced by social calling. And by no means do I infer that the salespeople are extinct. If they were, I wouldn't have a job. Just the opposite. I think how you as a salesperson find out about people and how people find out about you has changed quite a bit. We know that these social networks are out there, and people are both learning about us, and we have the opportunity to learn about people. And one thing's for sure: if you're not in this picture somewhere, then you're largely outside of people's circle of trust. I think that there's no question, probably from anyone on this phone, that the world has changed and there's tons of information. I think the hard part is, how do you distill that information? How do you put it in the room with you, so to speak, when you're talking to someone? I think because we're all so busy, it's hard to do a lot of homework in advance of every call that we do, every meeting we have. The good news is there's lots of really cool tools out there that are integrated into the sort of flow of what we're doing as sales or business development or doing any kind of virtual meetings. And so I'm going to give you some very practical tools to help make that happen sort of easier and faster. There's two that I use every single day, and hopefully this isn't overly obvious, but Reportive is built into Gmail, if that's what you use, which we do, and Zopni is built into Outlook and soon releasing a Gmail version. But actually, as you're interfacing with people via email, setting up your meetings, setting up your virtual presentations, you can learn a lot about people in moments so that you don't have to do a whole session of finding out information and background about them. It can be right within the conversation, so to speak. So these are free. There's free versions of both of these tools. If you're not already using one, you should absolutely go down, Google them and download them. They've been around for a while. The CEO of Zopni. The kinds of information that they're collecting about people that's publicly available is super helpful in helping you get to have a personal connection faster with people. There's another service you're probably not familiar with where it's called Honestly.com. Honestly is a rating and review site for professionals. They have this really cool Firefox widget. If you use Firefox, if you don't, you should. But the Firefox widget allows you to basically, in any page that you're on online, you can highlight someone's name and hit any of these buttons, whether it's Google or Twitter or LinkedIn, and it pulls up their profile, or in Quora, it pulls up questions they've asked or answered immediately. So you don't have to go to LinkedIn, type in their name, figure out who they are, where they went to school, you may know in common. It just comes up automatically. This is also a free plugin. If you Google it, you'll find it, honestly.com, social link. I use it. It works great. Tells you how many times you use it, so I know I use it a lot. Here's another tool that you guys might not be familiar with, Inside View. It's a similar type of tool to Zopni and Reportive, except it lives in Salesforce. And the nice thing about that is it pulls that person's information in Salesforce and then goes and pulls their profile right into the Salesforce window. if you're using Salesforce, there's a free version of this too. You can, download from the, I believe you need to do it from the Salesforce App Exchange, but it's free. It's limited on the free version, but again, it gives you the LinkedIn information and certain like Hoover type information without having to go to a different website. If you use and live in Salesforce the way I do, then this becomes really useful. It's one or two steps removed from having to go find this person's LinkedIn profile and even connect to them right within Salesforce without having to go to a different window and all that good stuff. And then, of course, there's our app. You're in a meeting screen right now. We've actually got everyone's social profiles in. If you've chosen to come into the room or add your LinkedIn profile, you'll see everyone else's LinkedIn profile. So if you haven't realized it already, you can click on anyone's head on the left and you'll see the local time and weather wherever they are. You'll see their Twitter, their tweets. You'll see their LinkedIn profile, which you can only see if you actually have logged in with LinkedIn, which there'll be a button there if you haven't. The whole idea here is that within the window you can get background on someone, figure out what you have in common. You can see what city they're in and do all the low hanging fruit things we all do to make conversation in the beginning about the weather and about the sports near you, which we're adding soon, and all the things that you can do in the context of a meeting without having to leave the screen. Okay, so we're off to number 2. Actually, I cheated a bit here because there's really 5 things in number 2. I could have done a whole class about the structure of a pitch. I have to say, I've sold for a really long time. I won't say how long, because that'll tell you how old I am. But it's been a really long time, and I never, it took me until a couple years ago to understand what the formula of a successful pitch or a presentation was. And this isn't exclusive to virtual. It's any pitch or presentation. I knew I had natural abilities and learned how to present and how to sell, but I never really could write it down. I think most of us are like that. We learn on the job. There is no education for it. It's pretty hard to articulate how we do what we do. I finally figured this out a couple years ago, and the formula works great. So I'm going to go through each step and try to give you guys examples of how to do each one. And I think chronological order, by the way, matters. It does matter, and I'll tell you why as well. I think the first thing that you want to do is storytelling. I think when people get intimidated by sales for good reason, it can be scary in the beginning, but I find people take relief in knowing that sales is just, at the end of the day, storytelling, the call to action. So if you can tell a story, then you'll keep people engaged. I told you a story about me and my background, and I tried to make it interesting and logical. And you'll see how I hit some of these other points. But at the end of the day, if you're just blathering on about features and technical mumbo-jumbo, no one's really listening. No one's really visually engaged with what you're doing. So this is a pretty key. And I think your story should be, look, you're selling a product, whatever it is, and whoever you're talking to should be able to relate to it. Because if they don't, you're probably not talking to the right people. Tell the same story of pain and frustration or need that they ultimately can relate to, because what you're selling them should match that. And if you can't do that, then find some information about their background, through LinkedIn, make a personal connection, and tell a story that they'll relate to that way. I think storytelling isn't something you do. It's not only something you do first, it's something you do throughout an entire presentation. But as soon as you start weaving that story, the first thing you need to do is gain credibility with your audience. So it's not an accident that I told you about my background, from Truly and the team that we built there, because I wanted you to believe that everything I was about to say came from experience. It was credible. And if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you can see that I have a lot of experience in this world. I think if anyone on this call is in a startup, which I believe a lot of them are, or a fast-growing company that may not have as recognizable a name as Google, for example, they struggle with credibility. But there's lots of ways to gain credibility. It can be if you're earlier stage in the company. It can be your investors. It's no accident on our first slide that we have our investors on there. It can be recent news about you. We have the Wall Street Journal and TechCrunch. It could be your advisory board. It could be your founder. It could be the school that you went to. 30% of the first 100 employees at Trillia went to Stanford, and they got a master's degree. We used that really early on because it's all we had. And then we got really great investors, and we added that. Then we got really great customers, and then we added those. Whatever and however you do it, you've got to gain credibility up front, either you as an individual or your company or both. Okay, so assuming you've got credibility, relevance is kind of the next thing you need, right? So, okay, you're credible, but I'm really busy, and I need to understand how what you're about to say is ultimately going to benefit me. I think everyone knows the old adage, with them, what's in it for me? That's what people want to know really quickly. You got to address a couple things. Mark Schuster, who's a pretty prominent venture capitalist, right? He sold his company to Salesforce. He's got a sales background. He defines it this way: why buy anything? Why buy mine? Why buy now? Why buy anything? You have to obviously create within your own company or product the reason why anyone needs you. I can't speak to that. For us, one of our primary applications is this one, and we talk about the pain and frustration that the WebEx and GoToMeetings of the world cause in the software download and how we eradicate that. So, we not only identify in that conversation, that story, why buy anything? Obviously, everyone needs to do meetings virtually. Why buy mine? Because it's faster and more social and gets to do a lot more things. Why buy now? Well, for me, it's, if you don't buy now, you're going to lose a lot of sales. So what's every day cost you if generating $1,000, $2,000, $10,000 a day? And that's urgency, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But you've got to quickly tell them why this is relevant. Once it's relevant, I think impact is important, right? Because I think we all have an overwhelming number of options in any category of solutions to any of our problems. So people need to know really quickly how big of a difference is this going to make. And you got to make that really clear. If I can, to my point earlier, if 80% of revenue in most companies is generated by 20% of the sales force, if you're the manager and I can tell you that I can make the other 80% as productive as your top performers, you're listening. That's impactful. Numbers tell the story. If I tell you, if you're one of the other 80%, that I can make you as productive and help you make as much money as the top 20%, which you probably know how much they make, that's pretty impactful. Just figure out what it is that, how you can make a difference, a fundamental difference. If you can't, find another job, come work for us. Urgency, in my mind, is the hardest of all of these things to pull off. How do you get someone to buy now? Because if they feel like there's nothing between now, 3 months from now, or a year from now that they're going to lose by waiting, they'll wait because it's safer to wait, right? So how do you get them off their keister now? And I think there's a couple of ways. There's no, it's not math, right? It's not binary. There's a couple of ways to do this that I found very effective and that's repeatable. One is you create compelling events where you just use compelling events. Compelling events can be, I think the cheap ones are like promotions, right? You can create a promotion that has a timestamp on it. If they don't act before then, they lose whatever it is that you were willing to give them above and beyond the standard thing. I like scarcity a lot. So Groupon is a perfect example on a mass scale of scarcity. There's a limited supply. There's a lot of people that want it, and the time ticks away. Those groups, there's a lot of other flash sites that sort of ride on the scarcity wave. So the less your product is available, the more interesting it is. When we first launched our product back in November of last year, we did a free trial. Anybody could use it. We begged people to come in. It was like crickets. We locked it down and made it invite only, and overnight we had thousands of people on Facebook and Twitter and email asking us for access. Psychology makes a really, really big difference. I frankly think the most effective way to create urgency is to really understand what your customer or potential customer is trying to achieve. Right? What are their goals, and how can you map to those goals? So in our case, it's often about revenue. Okay, if I can figure out that someone needs to generate, let's call it $100,000 in the next 3 months, then I can ask, what happens if you don't hit that goal? Now pending doom has come because you're thinking, oh crap, I'm not going to get my bonus, or I'm going to get fired. Whatever the pending doom is, whatever the consequence of not meeting the goal, whether it's an individual or a company, you're visualizing it, you're feeling it, you're emotional about it. And I can help you work backwards to figure out what you need to do now or when you need to do what I want or need you to do to help to get you to where you need to be in 3 months. To me, that's the most effective way. And that requires some skill as a salesperson on listening, on needs analysis, on being a good question asker, to really understand and not just be somebody who shows up and throws up, but somebody who really understands and takes time to understand what someone's goals and needs are to map what they have and create urgency.
SalesCrunch. Learn more, earn more.